Hello friends, welcome back to this online lecture series on earthquake resistant design of structures. As you all know, we have started the discussion regarding the ductility for good performance of RCC buildings in case of lateral loads. In the previous lecture, we have discussed regarding the criteria for ductility, that is the application of IS 13920, criteria for material selection, then criteria to be kept in mind during analysis, and lastly we have seen the criteria for design. In today's lecture, we will see the behavior of horizontal members of the RCC buildings, that is the beams, when subjected to lateral loads, and how ductility is going to help us enhance the performance of these horizontal members under the effect of lateral loads. Right? So let us start today's discussion with the first understanding of how do beams in RCC buildings resist the earthquakes. So when I talk about beams, we know that in case of RCC buildings, when two columns and the beams horizontal member, that is the beam, these three members combine together, then they form the moment resisting frame. And as a result of this, these columns and the reinforcing bars of beams and the columns are integrated into each other. When this integration is done, then as a result of that, under the application of loads, what is going to happen is that these members are going to transfer the force, transfer the force from one to another, and they are going to act together. Right? So as a result of this, if I look at the structural geometry of the beam, then the structural geometry of the beam is basically going to consist of two types of bars. First is the horizontal bar and the second is the vertical bar. The horizontal bar is also known as the longitudinal reinforcement, which is going to go throughout the length of the bar and it is going to be straight. Second is the vertical bar, which is also known as closed stirrups or loops, which is going to form a circular loop, and it is going to be provided at certain intervals as per the guidelines mentioned in IS 13920 along the length of the beam. So as you can see in the figure over here, two types of reinforcing bars are shown. The top reinforcing bars are the top horizontal reinforcing bars are the top longitudinal bars, and then the bottom longitudinal bars are also shown, and there is a closed loop that is shown, which is going to connect the top bars with the horizontal bars, and it is going to form a confining area, right? So the diameter of this, minimum diameter of this closed loop is going to start from 8 mm, and in case of longitudinal bars, if we talk, then the maximum diameter of the bar can go up to as high as 32 mm as well, right? So now when I am talking about the beams, then in case of when these particular beams are going to be subjected to loads, then two types of failure are likely in case of beams. The first failure is known as the flexural failure, and second failure is known as the shear failure. So we will try to understand both these failures by means of the sketch that I have shown over here. So in the figure A, the flexural behavior of the beam is shown when it is subjected to loads. Now this type of behavior, as you can see, the bottom reinforcing bar, as you can see in the figure, there is crack that is going to be developed at the bottom of the beam, and from there on the failure will be initiated. But if you want to see exactly this type of failure, then there are two criteria. First criteria is that if the amount of tension steel is more, then this type of behavior will not be visible. If the amount of compression steel is more, then in that case, the type of behavior that you are seeing over here is going to be visible. Why? The reason for is that if the tension reinforcement is provided more, then what is going to happen is that the concrete is going to crush first as compared to the yielding of the bar under the application of the load. And when that type of behavior will happen, then it will result in brittle failure of the member and not the ductile failure of the material that we are promoting over here, right? So in order to achieve the ductile behavior, it is necessary that sufficient elongation of the bar should take place, and then the concrete should crush, and then the failure should be initiated, right? So for that to happen, the compression steel ratio has to be on the higher side and the tension steel ratio has to be on the lower side. If that is done, then and only then the type of behavior that you are going to see over here, where the elongation of bar will take place to a sufficient extent, and after that the crushing of concrete will be initiated, and then the failure of the beam will happen, right? So that is the first type of failure, or the first type of behavior, which is known as the flexural behavior. Second type of behavior is known as the shear failure or the shear behavior. So when you talk about the shear behavior, it is going to be purely happening under the effect of axial loads that are going to be there, and it is going to be more critical towards the support section. The flexural behavior is more prominent, as you can see in the figure. The flexural behavior is going to be more prominent towards the midspan of the beam, whereas the shear failure is going to be more dominant towards the support section, right? So as you can see in the figure, a diagonal crack will start from the support section, that is the top flange of the beam, and it will try to travel downwards. This diagonal crack that will take place, it is going to have an angle of 45 degree with the horizontal. So if you want to avoid this kind of shear failure in the beam, then for a result of that we provide the transverse reinforcement, which is also known as the closed loops or the stirrups that we talk about. These stirrups have to be placed closely near the support section, and it has to be placed at a larger distance in the midspan section. Why? Because the shear reinforcement, if I draw the shear diagram, then the shear requirement is going to be more near the supports as compared to that of the center of the span. And when I talk about the moment, then in that case the moment is going to be more at the center and less towards the support. So that is why longitudinal reinforcement is going to be required in greater quantity in the center of the span, and shear reinforcement is going to be required on a higher side near the support sections, right? And that is why these two types of failures are there. In case of shear reinforcement also, if the shear cracks are happening, then as a result of that again the brittle failure will be started, and we do not want that type of failure, right? As a result of that, ductility has to be introduced in the members, and if it is introduced, then the elongation of bars will take place, and as a result of that the ductile failure will be possible, right? So now if I want to introduce, we have understood the significance of ductility in beams, but if I want to introduce the ductility, then there are certain guidelines that are given by IS 13920, and I have to strictly follow these guidelines in order to ensure that the ductile behavior of horizontal members is achieved, right? So first criteria that we are discussing is regarding the sizing of these horizontal members. So IS 13920 is telling that the factored axial compressive stress in the member should not exceed 0.08 FCK. If it is exceeding 0.08 FCK, then the resizing of the member has to be done. Second, the ratio of beam to depth should be more than 0.3. That is, if you are assuming either of one dimension, then with the help of this ratio you will be able to get an idea about the other dimension that is required. That is, the ratio of B to D, that is width to depth, should be greater than 0.3. Then the third criteria is that the width of the member, that is the width of the beam, should be minimum 200 mm, right? And the fourth criteria is that the depth of the beam should not be less than 1/4 of the clear span of the member. Clear span is the span that is going to be there after eliminating the size of the columns. That is, the in-to-in span of the beam is known as the clear span. So if you want to get an idea regarding the approximate depth of the beam that you need to provide depending upon the span, then as per IS 13920, the criteria is that the depth of the beam should not be less than 1/4 the clear span of the member. These are the guidelines that is regarding the sizing of the beam. Then the next guideline is regarding the provision of longitudinal reinforcement in beams, right? So these guidelines also have to be strictly followed, and these guidelines have to be first followed in the design office, then this can be followed on the site. That is why the role of the structure engineering is very important. If the structure engineer in the office is negligent to follow these guidelines, or if he is ignorant to follow these guidelines in the design office, then the ductile behavior or ductile performance of the building cannot be achieved on the site. So that is why the correct application by the structure engineer and the awareness by the structure engineer in the design office is a very critical element in good performance of buildings on the site. So when I talk about the longitudinal reinforcement in beams, then IS 13920 is again giving you a list of these guidelines that are there. First is that at the top and bottom of the beam, minimum 2 12 mm bars should be going throughout the length of the beam. That is, 2 12 mm bars at top of the beam, 2 12 mm bars at the bottom as bottom reinforcement, and these reinforcing bars should go throughout the length of the beam. Then the second criteria is that the tension steel ratio at any face and at any section should have a minimum value of 0.24 under root of FCK by F5. That is, the tension steel ratio at any face and at any section. These words are critical, right? Any face, any section. So whether it is tension phase, whether it is compression phase, and at the same time at any section throughout the length of the member, right? So throughout the length of the member, the minimum steel that has to be provided, that has to be 0.24 under root of FCK by F5. Now these guidelines are to be followed for primary members only, that is the members that are taking part in the lateral load resisting system. For secondary beams, these clauses will not be applicable. That has to be understood, right? So beams that are going from column to column, and if this frame is a lateral load resisting frame, then these guidelines of IS 13920 have to be followed. Then the third guideline that is there is that the maximum steel ratio should not exceed 0.025. That is, the maximum steel in horizontal beams should not be greater than 2.5%, right? And lastly, the positive steel at a joint must be at least half of the steel that is provided in the tension phase at that particular joint, right? So with that I will be explaining in the next slide with the help of a sketch. So I hope that these three guidelines regarding longitudinal reinforcement is clear. Again I am repeating, first 212 mm bars at top throughout the length, 212 mm bars minimum at the bottom. Second criteria, minimum tension to steel ratio at any face and at any section throughout the length of the beam should be 0.24 under root of FCK by F5. Maximum ratio or maximum tensile steel ratio in longitudinal beam should not exceed 2.5%. And lastly, the amount of positive steel to be provided at a joint should be at least half of the total tensile steel that is provided at that particular joint, right? So now as you can see in the figure over here, that is a longitudinal section of a beam is shown, right? So when I am talking about the last clause that we have seen, then you can see that two bars are shown. One bar is shown at the top that is going through and through. Second bar is shown as the bottom which is going through and through. So you can consider these bars as following the guidelines of the first clause, that is 212 mm bars are to be provided through and through. Second guideline is that near the support section, the positive steel that has to be provided should be at least 50% of the total negative steel provided at that particular junction, right? So the negative tension or the negative moment diagram or the tension phase is going to be on the higher side, that is on the top side, right? If you look at the moment diagram of a continuous beam, then we all know that if you look at the moment diagram, then the tension phase is going to develop at the top side of the beam, that is near the top support, right? So whatever steel you are going to provide for that particular moment, half of that steel has to be provided at the bottom also near this particular junction. For example, the top moment is such that the area of steel required is 12 cm square at that particular junction near the support, right? So if I provided 12 cm square steel at the top, then my bottom reinforcement should be minimum 6 cm square, right? So that is what the clause is trying to say. Then the other guideline that the code is telling is that whatever reinforcement you are going to provide at the tension phase should the minimum amount of longitudinal steel throughout the beam should be at least 25% of the total steel that you are going to provide at the tension phase near the support, right? Again I am repeating, the minimum longitudinal steel that is to be provided throughout the beam should be at least 25% of the total steel that you are going to provide near the support section, right? For example, again I have said that 12 cm square is the amount of steel required due to the moment diagram. Then 25% of this 12 should be minimally, that is 3 cm square steel should be provided throughout at top and bottom along the length of the beam, right? So this is also an important guideline for longitudinal reinforcement of the beam. Next we come to the shear reinforcement. So as I have discussed earlier, in order to avoid the shear failure in the beam, the shear is going to be critical near the junctions, that is near the supports, right? So the code is telling, as you can see in the figure over here, the code is telling that closed loop should be provided near the support section and the loop should be provided at a far distance in the midspan section. So same thing is shown by means of a figure also here also. Now if I look at the figure closely, then the closed loops are provided, but the question that comes is what should the spacing of these loops, right? So for the selection of spacing, again 3 guidelines are provided. First is that the location of the first loop or the location of the first strip from the face of this column should be at least at 50 mm apart, right? From the face of the column, the first ring should be at least 50 mm apart. That is the first guideline. Second, the spacing of these closed loops or the stirrups that are going to be provided near the supports should not exceed 3 criteria. First criteria is that d by 4, that is the effective depth divided by 4. Second criteria is 8 times the bar diameter, where the bar diameter is the smallest diameter of the longitudinal bar, and third criteria is 100 mm, right? And these 3 criteria should be followed for a distance of 2d from the face of the column, as you can see in the figure. That is, for a distance of 2d from the face of the column, these closed stirrups are to be provided, and in this range of 2d, the spacing of the stirrups has to be minimum of 3 criteria. The first criteria is d by 4, second criteria is 8 times the diameter of longitudinal bar, and third criteria is 100 mm. And in case of longitudinal bar, the diameter of the smallest longitudinal diameter should be considered, right? And when I am talking about d, that is either 2d or it is d by 4. In both the cases, effective depth of the beam is to be considered, that is the depth of the beam that is to be calculated after subtracting the cover, right? So that is how the stirrups are to be provided near the support. And if I am going to provide stirrups in the center portion where the shear reinforcement requirement is going to be less, why? Because that is the central portion of the beam is going to have minimum shear force value, and possibility of point of zero shear is also likely to be there. So as a result of that, the code is suggesting that in that particular region, the spacing of stirrups can be increased, and that spacing has to be in the range of d by 2. That is, at the support we are having the spacing of d by 4. So exactly double spacing is to be considered for the remaining span in the beam, right? So these are the guidelines for shear reinforcement, that is as per IS 13920. The minimum diameter of the link that is to be provided, or minimum diameter of the stirrups that is to be provided, has to be 8 mm, right? So the selection of diameter starts from 8 mm, and the shear strength or the shear capacity of these stirrups should exceed the flexural capacity, so that the brittle failure of the material can be avoided and the ductile failure of the beam can be ensured. So as a result of that, this criteria has to be followed very strictly. And lastly, the code is also saying that if you are going to provide laps in the horizontal beam, because if the length of the member is large enough, then lapping of horizontal bars cannot be avoided, right? And if you are doing lapping, then the possibility of there is reduction in the strength of the junction is possible. So in order to avoid this reduction in the strength, the code is saying that wherever the lapping of horizontal bars is there, then also the spacing of the loops, or spacing of the stirrup should not exceed 150 mm in that particular region as well. That is why again it is shown over here, where you can see the laps are provided, and if the laps are provided, then the close spacing of the loops is provided, and the maximum spacing allowed in that particular region is 150 mm, not more than 150 mm. Next we come to the anchorage of beam bars in the external joint, that is the beam column junction, right? Because we have talked about beam column junction also, that these two elements are going to be casted monolithically, and they will act together, and as a result of that, the transfer of forces is going to be there from one member to the other member. So in order to ensure this complete transfer of forces, the anchorage is also going to be sufficient, and also required to be sufficient, and that is why the code is also highlighting this particular beam column joint also. And for the beam column joint, the guideline is such that, as you can see in the figure, the top and the bottom, both the horizontal bars, have to be anchored in the column by a length of LD, that is the development length plus 10 times the bar diameter, right? So if I am having a bar diameter of let us say 16 mm, then 10 times bar diameter is 10 into 16, that is 160 mm plus the development length. So if let us say that I am getting the value of development length from IS 456 as 50D, then 50 into 16 is 800, 800 plus 160 is 960. So the L that is going to be formed at top and bottom of the beam, which is going to be anchored in the column, has to have a minimum length of 960 mm, which is going to be anchored in the column. And if this is done, then the complete fixity is going to develop at the beam column junction, and the ductile behavior is going to be possible. And in case of internal joints, what is going to happen is that through and through the bar should pass through the column joints, and at that particular junction the lapping of bar should not take place. Right, so that is what we have discussed in the last slide, that is lapping of bars is also important. So regarding lapping also, the code is giving you guideline that there are certain locations where lapping is preferred, and there are certain locations where the lapping should be avoided or the splicing should be avoided. So the longitudinal bars shall be spliced if the hoops are provided over the entire splice length, and the maximum spacing is 150 mm. That is, if the splicing of bars is done, then also in that entire region of the splice length, the spacing of the stirrup should be closed, and the maximum spacing should not exceed 150 mm. Second, regarding the lapping of horizontal bars, for that also guidelines are given that the lap length should not be less than the development length. That is the example that I gave you, that as per IS 456, if the calculation based on the grade of concrete and grade of steel is such that the value is coming as 50 times diameter, then minimum 50 times diameter development length has to be provided. And if we talk about the location of the lap, then location of the lap and location of the splices, for that also certain guidelines are given. That is, the code is saying that the lap should not be provided within a joint, or at a distance 2D from the joint, or at the same time d by 4 distance from the face of the column, right? So again, let us break it down slowly. So if I talk about lap joint, then it is saying that the lap should not be provided within a joint. So exactly near the column you cannot provide it. Second, it is saying 2D distance from the face of the column. So there also you cannot provide. That is from the face of the column up to 2D distance, where D is again the small effective depth of the beam. Right? For that distance also the lap should not be provided. And lastly, D by 4. At that region also the lap should not be provided. Why this is done? Because if you study the moment diagram, then in case of continuous beams or in case of fixed beams also, what is going to happen is that the tension reinforcement is going to be maximum near the supports, right? And when tension reinforcement is going to be maximum near the supports, then as a result of that, the tension and compression force is going to be more if you calculate it from the lever arm. So as a result of that, the steel requirement is going to be on the higher side. So if you provide lap at that particular junction, then the strength of that particular junction is getting reduced. And that is why the code is saying that the lap should not be provided at a column location, at exactly the columns, at 2D distance from the columns, and at D by 4 distance from the column, right? So all these three criteria may govern depending upon the situation, and these three criteria have to be checked, and accordingly the location of lap spice has to be decided. And wherever the lap is provided, the maximum spacing of the loop should be 150 mm. It should not exceed beyond 150 mm. I hope the guidelines for ductile detailing of longitudinal bars and transverse reinforcement in case of beams is clear to you. In the next lecture, we will be discussing the ductile detailing guidelines for columns. Stay tuned for the further lecture series. Thank you.